Okay, so in those meetings in Washington yesterday, U.S. President Donald Trump and Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, raised the possibility of reviving the Keystone XL pipeline. It would run from northern Alberta to the U.S. Midwest. This, as Alberta has been pitching a different pipeline, one that would run from the province to the northwest coast of British Columbia. BC Premier David Eby says he doesn't support it, but Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, she is not backing down.
Should it really be easier for us to deal with Donald Trump and get Keystone XL restarted and built down to the Gulf Coast? Should that be easier than building a new bitumen pipeline to British Columbia, Port of Prince Rupert, so that we can access Asian markets? Like, does Canada work or doesn't it? That's the turning point that we have right now.
Well, the Premier of British Columbia, David Eby, joins me now. Premier Eby, always good to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us today, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me, David.
You just heard Premier Smith criticizing your government for being harder to deal with on a pipeline project than President Trump. She's also referred to you as un-Canadian and calls your actions unconstitutional. Them's fighting words, Premier. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, it's hard to know where to begin, David. I've been trying to maintain a good relationship with Alberta. There's so much that we can do with Alberta, and we've tried to work with them on a number of projects. But what I have right now is a minister from Alberta who is going along to First Nations along the coast of British Columbia and saying that Alberta is going to be building a heavy oil pipeline through to their communities, which they see as an existential risk. There is an oil tanker ban off the coast for good reason. It protects a very fragile coast, but it was also the social license for a significant economic development piece along the north. Major projects, the largest private sector investment in Canadian history in LNG Canada Phase 1. That coalition is currently considering Phase 2. There's Silisms LNG and Cedar LNG, as well as a massive port expansion in Prince Rupert. All of it depends on the goodwill of these First Nations. And this is all being put at risk by a premier from Alberta who's advancing a project that has no proponent, no route, no private funding. And these are projects in BC that have proponents, private funding, they're through environmental assessment, and they're ready to go. And so to have those projects put at risk by what is frankly a non-existent project from Alberta is wildly frustrating.
Okay, I want to just talk about those phone calls from the Alberta minister that you mentioned there, because I spoke with Marilyn Slett on the show last week, and she said she'd been called, I think, the day before the Premier announced that she was going to be, basically the government would be the proponent. They're calling them directly, not saying they want to build a pipeline, they're saying they will build a pipeline. I mean, what is your understanding of what the nature of those conversations are?
Well, I know what I've been told directly, which is that Alberta has a proponent for the project, and that if the pipeline is not built, then the country as a whole is broken. Which tells me that from the perspective of the Premier's office in Alberta, this is an existential issue for them. The only way this pipeline gets built is if there are tens of billions of dollars of taxpayer dollars going into it. There is no private proponent putting it forward. And if there is $40 to $50 billion of federal money to build a pipeline from Alberta to BC's north coast, well, let's have a fair and open bid process among all the provinces and territories to show what we could do with that kind of money. Why is it always Alberta that threatens to leave the country unless they get tens of billions of dollars? On Pipeline 1, $30 billion of federal money went into the Trans Mountain Pipeline project. It's not even at capacity, and there's an optimization project that could significantly increase the amount of product that it moves from Alberta to Tidewater to Asian markets, but there's no interest in talking about that. It is exclusively about this non-existent project that threatens big projects in BC that are going to benefit the whole country that, frankly, Canadians from coast to coast to coast work on and help us deliver.
Okay, when we spoke a couple of weeks ago when you were here in person in Ottawa, you talked about how you were able to do your economic industrial agenda in northern British Columbia on those LNG projects because of the federal climate policies and the goodwill that engendered from your coastal First Nations. These phone calls from Alberta, this push from the Premier of Alberta, I'm taking from your comments that you're suggesting this is undermining that consensus, threatening that consensus, and could lead to the revocation of the goodwill that supports your projects. Am I reading you right, that essentially the actions of Alberta is undermining the prosperity of BC potentially?
That's exactly it. We have a very fragile consensus. I hope to make it a durable consensus. We're actually following Alberta's lead on setting up a line of financing for First Nations to be able to participate economically in these major projects. We want to firm up that coalition, ensure we have a long-lasting and durable coalition for resource development in British Columbia and across Canada. But to work for years on this, to literally do the groundwork for years, laying the pieces in place, ensuring that everything's ready to go. And then at the final stages, when we have a major project like LNG Canada Phase 2, at final investment decision, permits for Silism's LNG, construction underway at the port, and more to come, to have Alberta wander in and say, well, we haven't done anything, and we don't actually have a project, but we're just going to see what happens if we just show up here and start making some phone calls. Well, it's going to cause a mess. And so I've tried to be polite about it because I know the pipeline's not actually going to get built. Like, it's not a big deal if we don't say anything. But now to have them showing up in the province and advancing this agenda and threatening these projects in British Columbia is a serious, and it's a big problem for us and for Canadians, because these projects are going to deliver the jobs we desperately need, right, because our forest sector has just been hammered by 10% more tariffs from Donald Trump. So we need these jobs yesterday, not like 5 or 10 years from now, and certainly not exclusively publicly funded.
Okay, so you and Premier Smith have been talking about each other. You've been talking at each other. Are you and Premier Smith going to be speaking to each other? Because it seems, Premier Eby, that it might not be a bad idea. Well, maybe it is a bad idea to get you both in a room, but you should at least get on the phone. It feels like there needs to be a conversation between your two governments. Is there any sign of that happening anytime soon?
Yeah, look, I have absolutely no animosity for Danielle Smith. I understand she's doing what she feels she needs to do as a politician in Alberta. I understand that. I understand politics, all these other things. I have explained to Premier Smith on multiple occasions the impact of what she's doing, that this had better be a real project. She better have a proponent before she starts this work. And she understands my position very clearly. She also understands the opportunity around Trans Mountain, around an intertie electrically with Alberta that would reduce rates for Alberta consumers, reduce emissions, around working together on hydrogen, a real industry with real proponents that wants to get their product through the Port of Prince Rupert. Like, there's so many opportunities, real opportunities for us to work on together. I'll sit down with Premier Smith any day, and we can engage civilly on this, and we will. But the bottom line is, I just can't sit by and have her say that Canada doesn't work unless she gets her way on this pipeline, which, bottom line, means that Canadians from coast to coast to coast need to pay tens of billions of dollars to Alberta to deliver another publicly funded pipeline when they're not even using the pipeline we bought them last time. And so when you put those things together, and the cost to Canadians of potentially compromising these major projects that we're already trying to advance, like, there's a lot for us to talk about, but there are certain lines in the sand for British Columbia, and one of them is, don't mess with our projects unless you've got something real to bring forward. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's too much to ask. That feels fair to me, and fairness is a real Canadian value. Well, look, Premier Smith can push for the pipeline. You can push back against the pipeline. Ultimately, when it comes to these disputes, as we learned with TMX, it's the federal government that has constitutional control over inter-provincial projects like this. So how far are you prepared to push back with the federal government? And have you talked to the Prime Minister or Minister Hodgson or anyone at the top levels of the federal government about what is at stake here if this push from Alberta threatens your developments in BC? Yeah, I've been really clear with the federal government that I want to see across Canada and the territories a fair and level playing field. If there are tens of billions of dollars of federal funding available, then every province and territory should get to make their pitch for that money. How many jobs can you create? How much private sector employment can you create? How much private sector investment can you bring in? How much tax revenue can you generate? Because I think if that were done fairly across Canada, you would see a very different set of projects that, frankly, are not getting the attention they deserve because Alberta is insisting on sucking all the oxygen out of the room on this non-existent project. And so I'm not worried about, first of all, I want to say clearly, I recognize the constitutional authority of the federal government on this. Mm-hmm. It is a trans-provincial. We went to court on this. It's very clear. But that doesn't mean that I can't point out that this is not a real project, that it doesn't exist, that it's not funded, that it is a Crown corporation funded by Albertan taxpayers, backed up by a publicly owned corporation that runs the Trans Mountain pipeline. It's all tax dollars all the way down, and it will be in future. So how are we going to pay for it if it kills private sector projects that are worth tens of billions of dollars? That's my question. Right. Okay. And I just have one final question. Your acknowledgement there of the federal government's authority and its constitutional role, that got litigated because
because of the fight between former Premier Horgan and Rachel Notley at the time, the former NDP Premier of Alberta.
I was AG at the time.
Well, there you go. So you know it well. But that's it. Like, you accept that this sits with the Prime Minister. There will be no legal moves or anything by the government of BC to stop this. Should it move beyond the hypothetical stage, you're just going to make your political arguments against it and accept that it's up to the federal government should it come to that point?
Well, there won't be any legal moves because there's not actually, I mean, and David, this is the part where we keep running up against. There's no actual project.
I know, yeah.
And so this pretend project, like it is a Crown corporation that is entirely, it is a communications exercise. And it is competing with real projects that are meaningful, expand our market access internationally. And I just have to be so clear about that. So I'm not worried about legal arguments against a non-existent pipeline. The situation is very different from the Trans Mountain scenario this time around.
Okay, British Columbia Premier David Eby, we always appreciate the time. I know you're busy, but thank you for being here today, sir.